Yeah, we're going to be kind of shifting our focus a bit now to Tropical Storm Laura, which looks like it still has the potential of becoming a very powerful storm once in the Gulf of Mexico. But we also don't want to kind of forget about Marco, because we are still seeing some coastal influences, a little bit of flooding. And remember, we still have some heavy storms that are off to the east. Now, we really lucked out in terms of having a fairly dry day today, but there are still some storms associated with it that will likely be moving in our direction overnight tonight as the center of circulation starts pushing in our direction. And boy, on satellite, especially the high resolution visible satellite, you can clearly see that center of circulation. We can kind of follow it along here, and we're starting to get that path generally toward kind of the northwest, which is what the computer models had been saying. It's been a slow process. What's something that the computer models really, though, didn't get a good grasp of is exactly where the thunderstorms would be. Now, luckily, again, for us, most of those were off to the east of the storm, which really benefited us. Bad news for the folks in the Florida Panhandle, but something we also talk about is the fact that when you're on that northeastern side, you do have the risk of some tornadoes. And notice we now have for the Florida Panhandle, parts of lower Alabama, and even into Georgia, a new tornado watch that's been issued. And it's possible that as the center of circulation starts moving across the central part of or southern part of Louisiana, and we start to see this area of thunderstorms over us, we may see perhaps a tornado watch issue. Not to say, though, that the kind of coverage and intensity of the rains that they have had over Florida will be like that over us. In fact, it looks like they will be weakening as that generally moves in our direction. But in terms of the heavier storms, they have been far displaced from the center of circulation thanks to that dry air. Thank goodness for the dry air and wind shear. One, helping to rip the storm apart, keep it very weak, preventing it from re-intensifying, and two, kind of pushing all of that convection, the thunderstorms, away from the center. So though the center is going to be moving in our direction, remember, at these same times, most of the thunderstorms are going to be kind of in this position here by 1 a.m. tonight, and then going into early during the day on Tuesday. So maybe more during the day Tuesday that we actually see some of the rainfall from Marco's kind of weakening circulation begin moving more so over southeast Louisiana. And the rains that we have seen passing through very briefly during the day are associated with Marco. But luckily, with that dry air in place, we have not seen nearly the rain coverage nor intensity across the southeast Louisiana. That has all been focused well to our east today. Now, as I mentioned, that will be moving in our direction, though I'm not foreseeing it to be quite this expansive once it moves it over us. Here's what our computer model is saying. Notice the intensity of that rainfall really starts to evaporate, just kind of dissipate because of the dry air aloft as it moves in our direction, and then some scattered showers as we get into the day tomorrow. Then we're going to start to shift our focus toward what will likely be at that point Hurricane Laura. And again, we have started to see a little bit more consensus in the computer models. We've been posting about this all day long if you're following. I know it can be almost overwhelming when you're trying to focus on this on social media, internet websites, because there is just so much information out there. So we're trying to condense it for you here and explain what is going on. Very generous, I would say, at calling Marco still a tropical storm. We have the center of the storm just off the mouth of the river, and at Main Pass, winds sustained are only at 28 miles an hour. Now, they are gusting up to 36 miles an hour, but a sustained wind of 28. Even when the storm was right here, you basically had the storm at the last advisory right in between 4 buoys. None of them had tropical storm force winds. So you're really hard to press to find strong winds near the center. Maybe within some of the thunderstorms that are well displaced from the center. I think it's kind of a generous call to still say that this is a tropical storm. Dry air and wind shear were definitely on our side with this storm. Doesn't look like that is going to be the case as Laura gets into the Gulf, as this upper trough, which has really been persistent, should start to lift. I say should. It's possible that the dry air and upper trough kind of hang in place. And also notice the steering for Laura now is coming in from this big upper high. What do you see moving over Florida right now and getting ready to move into the Gulf of Mexico? More dry air. Will perhaps that keep Laura from just exploding in strength? Who knows? Computer models have not done a good job of forecasting a lot of the upper level influences nor the dry air with Marco, and there's nothing to say that it won't be kind of a little bit more unsure of the forecast with Laura. Now, I will say it does look a little bit more accurate with the steering currents. In other words, what is going to force Laura to keep getting pushed farther and farther to the west. It does look like the upper high is building in now and will continue to do so, which is going to push Laura away from us. Certainly not great news for our neighbors in southwest Louisiana, parts of Beaumont, the Houston area, as it looks like they are far more under the gun now as this upper high or the upper ridge really starts to build in across the Gulf of Mexico. But that also should prevent Laura from ever trying to making a turn sooner and over southeast Louisiana. And as I mentioned, we're finally starting to see a little bit more consistency in the computer models. Storm itself is right near the Isle of Youth in Cuba with winds of 60 miles an hour. So yeah, the thunderstorm development has started to look a little bit more impressive, but with the proximity of land, we were talking about this yesterday, that even if the center of the storm, which it has, been able to keep itself over water, the fact that you've got the land mass just to the north would prevent any real thunderstorm development on the northern side. It's kept it all down to the south and just prevents Laura from just rapidly intensifying. That is not going to be the case once it is in the Gulf of Mexico. And there are still some computer models that are indicating this could easily be a major hurricane before landfall. And again, somewhere around the Texas-Louisiana line is looking very, very likely, as we are finally starting to see a little bit more consensus with those computer models. And now with the new advisory of Laura and kind of the continued weakening of Marco, Marco's watches and warnings are no longer in effect. New tropical storm watches are up, mainly down along the coastline because of Laura. Hurricane watches are in effect basically for the areas just west of our viewing area. Models are still a little bit more spread, but we are beginning to see a little bit more consistency. And as far as either of these storms go, this is the most consistent we have seen the computer models. Remember, earlier runs had them all over the place. We have finally started to see them kind of narrowing down a Texas-Louisiana area for landfall. So here's kind of the remnant circulation of Marco moving along the coastline or just inland. This is the GFS forecast. Here is the center of Laura Tuesday at 11 o'clock. This is going to be piling up water. Main concern, it looks like, for southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi from Laura right now, it looks like our main concerns are going to be the high coastal flooding, or the high water and coastal flooding. That high water is also going to be piled up in Lake Pontchartrain. Now, what really helped us out was the fact that we did not see the at one time expected storm surge from Marco, and we were kind of assuming we would have higher water from Marco. We wouldn't get a whole lot of a reprieve on Tuesday before that water piled up again because of Laura. Well, luckily, water wasn't nearly as high as Marco was a far weaker storm, so we are still expecting a surge from Laura, and maybe a considerable surge considering how powerful the storm could be, but perhaps not as high as we once thought, because it doesn't look like Marco really verified in terms of those storm surge numbers. So this is the Euro model. Again, there goes the circulation from Marco. Here comes Laura following right behind. Once again, about the same time, about the same position, due south of New Orleans, piling up that water. We are certainly going to see some rain and sometimes heavy downpours, but it looks like the greatest threat, the greatest impacts are going to be the coastal and lakeshore flooding. Laura continues to strengthen out over the Gulf waters, and the Euro has a far more intense storm working its way again basically right along the Louisiana-Texas state line. So the models are really starting to hone in on that placement. Now we are still, because of the position of both of the storms in our area, again, not at the same time, but they will be bringing in a risk of some severe storms. So for Tuesday, a low-end risk of severe weather, and then that risk kind of shifts to both sides of the lake as we get into Wednesday. Again, just kind of following the path of Laura, we are going to be on the side where you may see some brief little spin-ups. And we're not talking about a widespread tornado outbreak, but certainly that is going to be something that we have to watch